Well, everyone, thanks for joining today. We're going to walk through an insider's guide to choosing an EDR and also talk about MDR, Managed Detection Response, on top of this. I'll be your speaker today, Seth Geftig. I am a vice president here at Huntress, and I'm really looking forward to walking you through this. So today's agenda, we're going to give you a little background up front. So for some of this review, this might legitimately be background, but I find even people who've been in this industry for a while often get confused on some of the terms that we talk about. So I want to level set there. We'll walk through some of the things you need to look at when you're evaluating an EDR. Ask yourself the question if you also need managed detection and response on top of that EDR tool. And then if so, how you would evaluate that and what those options are. And of course, we'll have time for Q&A. Speaking of Q&A, there is a Q&A panel within your webinar platform. If you have questions for me, or I also have one of my coworkers helping with the Q&A as well live, feel free to throw that in the Q&A panel. If you have just general chit chat you want to go, that's where the chat panel goes in. So I'd love to see where everyone's dialing in from today. I am calling in from Greenville, South Carolina, in the upstate of South Carolina, in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Love to know where each of you are calling in from. And again, if you have questions, use that Q&A panel and we'll get right to them. So I mentioned my name and my title, but really, why should you listen to anything I have to say? So I've been doing this a long time, so hopefully that helps. About 20 years working specifically for cybersecurity vendors. And my main skill set, the thing that I do for a living, is what we call positioning. And that's particularly helpful in a webinar like this, because I'm going to help try to position the different types of solutions out there. And hopefully that informs you of what the best avenue for you is. Obviously, I work for Huntress. I hope most of you on this call listen in and say, great, Huntress is the right solution for me. But if I'm doing my job right, a few of you should say, nope, that is actually not the right solution for you. And hopefully we'll walk you through why that would be. Other things I've done in my career that will help here and I think helps inform these opinions is that I have launched a lot of these types of tools, from next-gen AV to EDR to XDR multiple times, as well as multiple times managed detection and response products. But again, I still do work for a vendor, so obviously that biases me a little, and I'm going to do my best to keep it as neutral as possible and give you the best advice. Again, if you have questions, feel free to use the Q&A, the chat. I see people saying where they're coming in from: Charlotte, which is just up the road from me; Long Island, Overland Park. Spent a lot of time in Overland Park; Knoxville, also just up the road; and Windsor in the UK. Very nice. All right, so I mentioned we were going to talk about some background on the different terminology. So I think it's helpful to understand, when you think of EDR and MDR, how we got here as an industry in a lot of ways might help you understand, why do I even need these tools in the first place? So back in the old days, if you've been around as long as I have, it all started with AV. AV did its job really well for a really long time, and it's still an important tool. But AV is fundamentally flawed, at least legacy AV, because it's signature-based. We've seen this before. We know it's bad. Therefore, we'll block it in the future. So next-gen AV came along, and even though it's pretty much the same thing in terms of the intent of the product, they added more behavior-based and AI prevention on top of that. So some of the things that work there are looking at the code or the DNA of the file that you're looking at, and without having to run it, you could say, I'm looking at the code. I don't know that you're bad, but your DNA looks pretty bad to me, and therefore you're blocked. So all of this works today still as a preventative tool with a decently high efficacy rate. But we know that a perimeter-based solution or an automated protection solution will never, ever be 100% effective. They're not designed to be. So things get through into our environments that we have to deal with. And that's where EDR came along. Particularly in the early days of EDR, it was, you can't trust AV. What do we do about the things that came in that need a real human being to look at and give us an opinion on? And EDR is really good, or should be really good, at surfacing all the suspicious activity that's not so obviously bad we automatically block it, and filtering out the stuff that is so obviously good we don't have to look at it, and say, here's a tool for human beings to go look at this and investigate, seeing what's going on there. Over time, people said, this is a great concept. Rather than just focusing solely on EDR, tools have come out that expanded the amount of visibility it had beyond endpoint and looking at other sources. So for the most part, this is EDR plus. There are also SIM vendors that have renamed their product or try to recategorize themselves as an XDR, because conceptually they're doing the same thing, even though they have different methodologies to do so. But the whole point of the XDR is let's broaden the visibility, add more context. The more we can see, the more we can investigate, the better chance we have to detecting malicious activity before it really does damage. The problem with EDR and XDR is they're really hard to use, and they require really smart people with a lot of time and usually a lot of other friends on their team to help them out to make good decisions. And most organizations don't have the ability to do that. And so MDR, Managed Detection Response, came along and really started to change the game here by giving 24/7 coverage as a third party, saying, we know that you either don't have the expertise to do this, you don't have the time to do this, or you probably just want to go to bed sometimes and maybe take a vacation. MDR solutions should be 24/7, a team of human experts using really advanced technology on the other end of that screen, monitoring your environment to make sure nothing's going on that you need to be aware of. So it should give you a lot of peace of mind and help you take advantage of those EDR and endpoint protection technologies that you've already invested in. So that's a good level set background. Now let's talk about EDR specifically. When you look at what you need to think about when it comes to capabilities, the first one is what data are you looking at? Again, if you want more than the EDR endpoint only, then you're going to have to look at an XDR solution. But the question is, what are you going to do with all that extra data? Right? Do you need to look at all your firewall telemetry? Do you need to look at all the telemetry coming from your cloud environment? Do you know what to do with it if you had it? How much data is too much for you? Those are all the first types of questions you look at. But the second question is, okay, the tool itself should be bubbling up things that are suspicious to you. And what's the efficacy of that? It's one of the hardest things, honestly, to judge. Most, when you look at third-party analysis of EDR tools, they're very much focused on the breadth of capabilities. What kind of coverage do you have? How much of the MITRE attack framework, for example, could you see if an attacker is using those types of techniques? It doesn't tell you a lot on efficacy, and false positives are not something that vendors often will honestly give you the real answer for. So that's another thing to kick the tires on as you go through an EDR evaluation, where the data is coming from, what alerts are being sent to you, and then how accurate those are. And then once you get those alerts and says, hey, go look at this, the tool itself, how much capabilities the tool have for your team today, or even your team with a little investment, could actually use it to investigate bad things. Is it giving you all the context you need? Is the user interface understandable? Is it something that you need to be trained on? Do you need to be an expert in the EDR tool in order to get value out of it? The answer is yes for most of them. And then what could you use on that tool to go hunt on your own? So there's a lot of different definitions for threat hunting. It's almost become just a marketing term. But in here, I'm splitting out investigation capabilities is, hey, we found something bad, go look into it, and you use the tool to investigate. Threat hunting, saying, I'm just going to sit there at my screen and go proactively look for bad things, even though the tool didn't bubble up to me. Does it have the ability to do that? And do you have the team to do that? And then the most overlooked part of EDR is always the R, the response or remediation option. So once you find something bad, does it actually help you to fix that, either to stop the bleeding, rectify the issue, and get you back to a safe state? Often EDRs will fail here, or the operator using them doesn't have the experience to actually make sense of those recommendations. By the time they've investigated and thought through the response option, it's often too late. And then if you are an MSP, what specific features does it have on MSP? Having worked for vendors, I know that's always a good question to ask, because usually what I've seen in my career, when you don't have an organization that is focused on MSPs on the vendor side, that the MSP specific features usually come out 3, 6, 9 months after the new features GA for the regular audience. And that should give you a good indication of how much they value MSPs or building their product to make sure MSPs can use them. So that's kind of what you would look for to evaluate the EDR tool. But the next question asked is, do I actually have the ability to use that EDR tool? If I spend 6 figures on it, for example, will I get value back out of that? So some of the questions you have to ask yourself, whether or not you manage detection response. Again, this is basically having a 24/7 team of experts managing that tool for you and monitoring your environment. So are you able to do that on your own? Do you have a SOC, a Security Operations Center? If the answer is no, which is most organizations, then you most definitely need an MDR tool, MDR service on top of that. Do you have a mature security organizations? If you're a team of IT people, maybe with some security expertise or 1 or 2 security folks, internally, then you're probably going to struggle to get full value out of most EDR and XDR technologies. And then even if you have a good team in-house, what are they actually spending most of their time doing? Are they just looking at noise? Are they investigating a lot of false alerts? Are they peeling back layers of the onion but never getting to the middle of it? Do you actually have time as a team to free up resources to go threat hunting, to do the type of investigation that really only your team could do in-house because only you know your environment that well? Or are they mostly doing the surface work, dealing with the tool and the alerts that are coming from the tool? And then I'm guessing the answer to this one is yes. If you do have a security team, are they overworked? Are they stressed out? Do they like having their weekends and holidays off? Guessing the answer is yes to all of those, in which case MDR service would really help out in that situation. All right, so if you're considering EDR and you want to see do you need MDR on top of it, there's really three options for you. The first one is to fully manage in-house, and I would not recommend doing that unless you have a mature security operations center, the ability to do 24/7 coverage, and some well-resourced high team of decent amount of expertise there. So you'd rate high on the security maturity curve. If you are a mature org, but maybe you have a SOC, but it's not 24/7, you probably just need someone to supplement your team and do a lot of the heavy lifting to take the noise off your plate so your skilled team could focus on the really hard stuff, or to give you augmentation so that nights, weekends give you extra coverage that have that team. So again, your team can focus on those problems. So what you see is more advanced organizations choose the middle. Very few are actually managed fully in-house. Most people prefer, and I would imagine most people listening in today, to have a fully EDR, fully managed by MDR. And that's important because if you're evaluating EDR options, it's really hard to separate the EDR and then the service from the MDR on top of it. If you don't have a SOC, you wouldn't call yourself a mature security organization. If you don't feel like you have enough budget and enough staff and enough time, then this is probably the best solution for you. So my sort of hot take from that is basically less than 5% of all security organizations should be using an EDR in-house. Usually those are Fortune 1000 organizations, really mature security orgs, usually in a few key verticals where they have dozens of people in their security operations center. For most everyone else, they're going to have an MDR service on top of it if they want to get full value out of their tool. So begs us the next question. If you're considering an MDR, what should you be looking at? So of course, 24/7 SOC coverage. So any MDR out there, I'd be shocked if there's really any left that don't do 24/7 coverage from a well-resourced SOC. The other things you should be asking is, all right, I know you can detect and investigate, but what are you looking at? Are you actually have what we would call a detection engineering group or a security team that is building their own custom detections on top of the tools you're monitoring? Or are they just looking at the tools themselves, looking at the alerts and regurgitating them back to you? And how much of that team is human versus how much is that is automated? There are MDR services out there that they brag that they're fully automated, they're AI. I'm not convinced that the market is ready for that or that technology really is ready. It has to be a mix of the tech and the people, right? What that balance is might vary depending on your needs, but for the most part, you need both of those, and you need those both to be strong in-house. Another thing to look at with an MDR is saying, okay, if you find something bad, you're monitoring your environment, what exactly are you going to do for me? Are you going to guide me and help me step-by-step respond? Are you going to automatically take care of things for me? Are there humans that are going to jump in and take care of things for me? Those differences matter quite a bit, and which technique you utilize for which types of threats matters. What we see out there is there's a lot of guided only companies, and there's a lot of companies that rely a lot on automation. If you're looking at an MDR service that relies on automation, it's not necessarily wrong with that, but you have to really do your due diligence to see what the accuracy of that automation is, right? If they're going to respond on your behalf, what's their false positive rate? What's that process look like? Do you have the ability to have any control over it? On the communication reporting side, another thing that is often overlooked and frankly hard to judge without looking at the vendor's reputation or scores or really asking people you know in the industry is when they need to communicate with you, what methods do they use? What types of reports are they sending you? How much detail is in that report? If you communicate with them? Do they have limits on the communication? Do they charge you by the hour? Do they put a cap on how long you're allowed to speak to the experts? All of those things do come into play. So you're going to want to make sure you look at all of that. And then expertise and service. One of the ways a vendor can totally inflate their worth is by pretending that they have really smart people. And it's very hard when you're evaluating service providers to really know, like, how good are the analysts on the other end of the screen? And it's not just one or two analysts, it's the collective quality of the humans that are working there. There's ways you can get around that. Some of that is looking at the research the organizations put out. Some of it's looking at their reputation, again, looking at things like G2, or if they're a larger vendor, like Gartner Peer Insights, figuring out what do other people say about them? Are they satisfied with the service they're getting? Some of that is looking at the business terms, like getting down on the contract level, again, and seeing like what are they actually promising versus not. I will say that one of the questions we get asked the most that people want to also say is, how many people are in your SOC? Or how many SOC analysts, how many analysts specifically do you have working there? I know that makes sense to try to judge how big are they and they can take care of me, but it's also often a false question, because you could have dozens and dozens of analysts doing very manual work, or you could have few analysts that have automation tools that help speed up their response, but are still looking at all your things. Or you could have, fully automated out environments that there really isn't a lot of humans looking at it and providing a lot of that expertise on top of it. So the volume of people isn't really the question. It's how much quality of support are you getting from that organization? Because the number of people they hire and the endpoint or customer to analyst ratio can change over time, and it's still not really an indicator of quality. It's just, you can hire 20 low budget analysts, or you can hire 5 top tier analysts, and they're not necessarily the same thing. And then looking at metrics and reviews is mean time to respond, mean time to detect. Again, those are good metrics to ask about, but often can be manipulated by the vendor, right? There's a lot of things you can do with saying, hey, we respond in 3 minutes, for example. And it's like, well, respond to what? Do you do a lot of automated low level detections? Does that mean you're not actually spending the time and a human's not actually investigating these threats? So it's not that those aren't valuable metrics, but there's a lot of devil behind the details in both of those that you'll want to ask about. So I put together this grid to help you walk through MDR options. So there's different types of MDR providers out there. And again, as I said at the beginning, some of these will be spot on for you, and some of these you'll see are not necessarily right. It really depends on your organization. There's pure play, top rated MDR providers. I've worked for these vendors before. These are usually the best of the best when it comes to MDR. So in that case, you're going to bring your own EDR tool, and the vendor itself will be an add-on MDR service, and you can bring your own tool to the party, and they'll take care of it. And what you'll get is top of the line service. You're going to get a really well-funded team of experts doing detection engineering, so finding things in the data beyond just the alerts. That would be what you get in the top tier MDR service, and also real expertise on the incident response side. Like how many they've probably dealt with every type of incident you've seen out there, and they do it every single day. And they're going to give you the ability to work with your best of breed tools. So if you have an environment with a lot of different vendors you have in there, they should be able to accommodate that. But some of the reasons you wouldn't want to use them is often price and complexity. Those MDR providers are built for what we call here the 1%ers, the top 1%, most well-resourced, most well-funded, most advanced security teams out there are looking for a partner from a really high-quality MDR provider. And that's what they're built for, right? If you are not a mature security org, if they're going to be interacting with people in your organization that are IT folks or junior analysts, it may not be the right one for you. And also, if you don't have a large budget, it's also probably a difficult play for you. So there are other pure play MDR providers there that are low cost, the budget, right? And there's certainly a range of vendors in between here, but I'm trying to simplify for your valuation. Again, you'll bring your own EDR and they'll add their MDR service on top of it. And the reason people go with them is usually, hey, I like this idea. I can't afford the top tier ones. I'm going to go with a lower cost service. And I can still bring my own tools. I don't have to rip and replace something that I already have in my environment. But this is the main warning. mostly you get what you pay for with a lot of these pure play budget MDRs, where they're just taking alerts that the security tools you have. So let's say you have an EDR tool from, you just use Microsoft's EDR tool or you use SentinelOne, for example. Those will all spit alerts at you. And then rather than them actually investigating those alerts, adding context, looking at other things in your environment to make sure, is this good, is this bad, and let me help you actually respond to this, they're just going to take your alerts, do some basic alert fatigue, and regurgitate those back to you. So you'll get pretty much no context of why you're getting the alert, little help in how you actually should be responding to them. And what we see over and over with them is people regret those decisions because they're super noisy, right? So they're not solving your alert fatigue problem, and they're still confusing, and you need experts to understand what's coming out of them. So it doesn't solve the problem you have, which is I lack expertise, I lack resources. You're just spending a lot of money for someone to basically triage a chunk of your alerts and spit them back at you. There's also other vendors out there that are single vendor product and service. So this is a vendor that says we have our own EDR tool, and we also have our own MDR service, and those two things can be combined, right? Those are two separate things we offer. And again, there is a range of quality here of single vendor product and service. But in general, the reason you might go to one of them is that, sorry, the expression, but one we use a lot in this industry, the one throat to choke. So the vendor theoretically, but not always in practice, should be better at managing their own tool than a third-party MDR provider. Now, I've worked for top-rated MDRs that I think were better at managing those tools than the vendors themselves. But often you'll see that is the vendor who built the tool is actually not that great at managing it themselves. But that's the reason you would go to them. I just want one vendor, one service, one product. It's all taken care of. But the service quality is going to vary quite a bit from vendor to vendor there. And many of them, the reason they built that MDR service, if you go back to that one of the first slides I showed, the history, how we got there, the reason they have an MDR is for two reasons. Most likely is because they kept selling their tool to organizations who bought it, then had buyer's remorse because they did not have the ability to actually manage and get value out of that tool in-house. And I've worked for those vendors. There's nothing wrong with them. It's just you sell the product and then people are like, oh, actually, this is too hard for me to use, or I need to hire 5 more people to do this. And even then, I need 24/7 coverage. So often these vendors sold an MDR service because their EDR was really hard to use. And then probably in the last year, maybe year and a half, we've also started to see a lot more vendors pop in who just see the explosion of the MDR service part of the industry and just want to get in on the action. Most of them are pure play budget MDRs, or in some cases, low cost single vendor products and services. Huntress is a little bit different than these other types of options. So one of the main things from a tech standpoint is that our EDR product and our MDR service are 100% combined. You can't split those two apart. So you can't buy Huntress and just say, we'll run your EDR tool in-house, we don't need the service. And you can't buy Huntress and say, we just want the service, but we'll bring our own EDR tool. Our product is managed EDR in this case, which means the tool was built explicitly to be managed by us. And that is what you get. You get both the technology and you get the people when you buy it. So the reason people go with us is because the service is already included in the price. It's not an extra add-on you have on top of that. The other reason people go with us is because we are designed for under-resourced organizations. So those organizations who need to get a great value out of their options, but also want someone who's really strong on the tech standpoint and been doing this a long time, that are well established. So not someone who's cheap, but someone who's going to give me all the features that we need as an organization, all the service that we need that fit our needs, but nothing else that inflates the price. And that's why we have legitimately a cult-like following from our customers and partners, with G2 scores off the charts, because we have been so focused on providing value, right, for organizations that otherwise did not have a lot of good options for them. But again, some of you will come here and realize that Huntress is not right for you. And often when we see people say, no, sorry, you're not the right fit, they in those cases, they're not in love with the fact that our EDR is fully managed, because they might have their own internal team who wants to do their own threat hunting, who wants to do their own investigation with the EDR tool and are built for that. And if that's what you want to do internally, Huntress is not the right solution for you. because we are built to do all of that work on your behalf and only show you the output of what we find. So you don't have to be bothered with the threat investigation and threat hunting. But if you want to do threat investigation, threat hunting, you'll have to choose a different type of organization 9 out of 10 times. Different type of vendor, excuse me. So if you're half paying attention out there and you need 30 seconds to get my point, this is the 30 seconds to pay attention. If you're looking for a pure play, top rated MDR, there's a bunch I would recommend to my friends, but you're going to pay for them. And you're going to have to not just pay for the tool and the service, but you're also going to have to pay to maintain that over time. The one piece of advice is like, do not go with a budget MDR service. You're going to get what you pay for. You're going to get a bunch of low quality experts and low quality technology regurgitating the alerts that you're already generating right back to you with little context and little value. And often, even though it might seem economical, you're still throwing your money away compared to just going with a different option here. And the single vendor product and service, again, there's a lot of range of quality here. Part of the issue here is you don't really know what you're getting, right? Again, a lot of these organizations built an MDR service because their tool itself were really hard to use. And I'd ask yourself, what do you want to pay for here? Like, what do you actually have the ability to do? Because you're paying for both an EDR and you're paying for an MDR. Do you actually have the ability to use the EDR in-house, or you're just going to rely on the MDR service, in which case you're double paying? With Huntress, you get both of those combined. So it's a different option for you. So those are my thoughts on EDR and MDR. There are other viewpoints out there. Despite what I tell myself, I'm not the only viewpoint in the world. I'll give you a little bit of caveats. Forrester and Gartner are obviously probably the most popular analyst firms out there. Forrester does have what they call the wave for both EDR or EPP and XDR, and they have a wave for MDR services. Gartner does not have an MDR vendor comparison evaluation. They only have an endpoint protection, or I think they call it EPP, which is EDR, XDR combined, and AV. So Gartner has the EDR side only. Forrester has an EDR and an MDR one. You're not going to find you're not going to find us in either of those. Big companies like Sophos don't even fall into the Forrester MDR wave because those organizations are built exclusively for enterprise buyers and enterprise vendors who service them. So you could be the most capable vendor out there with, like us, with over 100,000 customers. But because those aren't large enterprises, they don't really rate them. And that's totally fine. I just want you to make sure when you read those reports, understand why one vendor may be in there and one not, and what that really means. It's a good data point, but certainly not gospel. The same thing for MITRE. MITRE is really good at attack evaluations on the EDR side. The results of those tests are kind of hard to interpret. So you see pretty much every vendor saying they're number one and they won the test. There is no winning those evaluations. They're looking for breadth of coverage there. Helpful if you are worried about all attack vectors and want to have full coverage there, but doesn't necessarily tell you how easy they are to work with, how usable the tool is, or how deep that coverage is. It just gives you breadth. On the MDR side, the evaluation is really, really hard to understand and mostly just tells you the same thing the EDR test does. And then there's G2 as well, and other peer review sites as well, like PeerSpot as well as one of those examples. For us, that's the one we like the most. Not surprising, that's also where we do the best. So that's other organizations saying this is what we liked and didn't like about the vendors. And again, those are just user opinions. So just like whether you're looking at Yelp or things like that, that's the collective experience, not necessarily your experience that you'll have with that vendor. So I've done a lot of talking about what to look at from an EDR and MDR provider. I'll give you a little bit of insight into what we do here at Huntress and our managed security offering. So specifically, I'm going to focus on our EDR tool. But as a company, our goal is to manage security to elevate SMBs, so the under-resourced, under-attack organizations out there, and the partners who protect them. So we have really, really, really small mom and pop shops that we protect via MSPs, and we have fairly large organizations that we sell direct to as well. That's going to be the M of SMB. If you're worried, am I an S, am I an M? It doesn't really matter. There's not many organizations out there that we won't work with, but we tend not to work with really, really large, really, really large enterprises. It's pretty much everyone below that. And that has given us a lot of credibility in the industry. We've been around doing this for a while. So I mentioned before, we have over 100,000 customers. I think it's actually 150,000 now. I think it's just crossed that threshold recently. Close to 3 million endpoints at this point that we manage, hundreds of thousands of identities as well, and about 5,000 MSPs and other types of partners that we work with. We have a range of offerings, so we can help protect your endpoints. That's our managed EDR tool. We also have the ability to secure identities. So we look a lot at account takeover, business email compromise. There we have MDR service that we layer on top of your Microsoft 365. And we are looking for account compromise and signs of account takeover, business email compromise, things like that. We also do security awareness training. So one of the biggest things we like to say is you can patch machines, but you can't patch people. So we know organizations are trying to reduce their risk and make themselves less vulnerable by empowering their people to spot threats before they actually make it on machines. So the most common one there, of course, is phishing attacks, but there's all types of security and compliance considerations you want to train your organization on. We have one of the best rated security awareness training programs out there as well. And I mentioned G2 several times. We continue to, again, perform off the charts in G2. Most likely to recommend, #1 overall, easiest to use, high performer, best relationship, best results, leader, mid-market, and small business. We do we're clearly the #1 vendor, both for EDR and MDR when you look at those charts overall, and especially when you look at SMB only. So I mentioned EDR a few times. I'm going to dig into that a little bit in more detail. So again, our job there is to protect organizations, to find threats on their endpoints and prevent them right at the source. So most threats either start at the endpoint or go through the endpoint at one point. And that's what we do. And we're really focused there with this tool. The EDR is fully managed. Again, you have all the expertise you could possibly need on the Hunter side without having to hire a single person. It works on day one. You don't have to hire anyone. We just turn it on. And immediately you have a 24/7 human-led SOC, threat researchers, detection engineers, a whole bunch of really, really well-respected experts on the other end of that screen looking out for your organization 24/7. And we do it in a way that's completely headache-free to you. So it will make your life significantly easier and boost the confidence you have knowing your environment is protected. Because when we send you an alert and say, hey, something happened here, either we took care of it or we need your help to finish remediating it, you can be pretty sure that it is in fact bad. Our false positives are legitimately less than 1%. That means over 99% of the time when we say we found something, the customer or partner on the other end of the screen agrees that, oh, that was bad. Thank you for catching this. And the other times, when we miss something, we get that report back saying, nope, we rejected this incident. I mentioned that we have really high scores when it comes to service, and it's really hard generally to determine how good are the people I'm going to be working with. In addition to those scores, our customer support scores, our CSAT scores there, are a 98.8%. And that has been consistent within about 0.1 percentage points over the last 3 years at this company. So when you deal with humans here, you're dealing with people who really care about you and want to do everything they can to make your organization safe and that you get the questions answered you need answered. And we're specifically designed for resource challenge teams. So we're going to give you a product that's affordable and simple to use, but without compromising quality. That doesn't mean you don't get the protection that you need or you're giving up on the security side. You're getting all the security that we see our 100,000, 150,000 customers. The threats that they're dealing with are the threats we are really good at stopping. You're not paying for a team of ninjas that are looking for that one military back 0 day, and you have to pay 10x the cost in order to get that protection. And the things that we do specifically in the product is that we are backed 24/7 by humans, but those humans are working in conjunction with the technology. And the great thing about that is you have one vendor to deal with. So when we find something, for instance, this happened recently with what we call slash and grab, the Screen Connect vulnerability. Not only were we able to see that before it was public and protect our customers and monitor their environments, but we were actually able to make changes in our product on the fly that kept them proactively protected even before they ever had the ability to patch their machines. And that's something you're only going to get when the technology and the people are combined as one. So if you had a pure play MDR provider, they'd have to call the vendor. The vendor would then have to answer that call and work with them. Or what you often get is the runaround when something breaks too. Like, oh, you missed something. Oh, that's the EDR's fault. You talk to the EDR vendors like, oh, that's the MDR's fault. With us, it's all the same thing. You don't have to worry about that. Specifically, we're looking for malicious behavior on the endpoints. We call that malicious behavior detection. We're looking at persistent foothold. Sometimes people call that living off the land. So how do attackers get into a machine is one way, how to get in the environment, but how they actually stay there and stay there undetected so they can do all the damage. We have specific mechanisms that we're looking for there. We're also looking for signs of pre-ransomware activity. And then we have these things called canaries that actually we don't actually need that often because usually we catch threats way before ransomware ever kicks in. But we give these fake files that attackers start to encrypt, and we know something bad happening, and gives us an early warning shot if we hadn't caught it in the pre-ransomware phase. And we also do things to look at reducing your attack surface, like looking for open ports and just keeping your hygiene safer as well. When we do find something, we can isolate proactively. We can take care of it on your behalf. We can have you click to approve that remediation and guide you through the response. I'll walk you through that in a little more detail. So one thing I hadn't mentioned here is if you use Defender, we'll go ahead and manage that for you. It is not something we need or you need. You can bring whatever AV you want, and we will manage. I think we work with pretty much every AV out there. But if you have a Defender, you get at no additional cost the added bonus of us managing it for you if you want. And that's nice because we'll take care of the policy management. We'll also take the triage from those alerts and take some additional context we get from Defender in our investigation. Again, completely optional. But once we have that data, we're then looking for, again, malicious process behavior, the footholds, ransomware canaries. When we do find something, our human-led SOC will investigate. So if it's noise, we'll triage that alert and say, nope, you don't have to look at this. You'll never see it on your desk. We'll investigate, and we'll even proactively threat hunt and look for bad things in your environment. And then a cool thing is because we have such a large customer base is we can do almost what we call herd immunity detection. So if we find something bad at one of our customers, because we also own that tech, as I mentioned before, we can keep everyone protected. So we can quickly update our tools to catch that even faster if we didn't before. And if something that a human only found by doing their investigation, we'll have the tech find it up front, which makes people protected and also moves us further away on the attack chain from the right of boom side. We can go further to the left there and stop things earlier. From a communication standpoint, when we do find something, what we do is we build custom incident reports every single time. So you'll get an incident report that gets really easy to follow, suggested next steps. We pride ourselves on making sure that even junior IT folks can see what the recommendations are and follow them if that is something that you need to do on your end. We'll email you. It integrates with your ticketing systems. We have phone, SMS as well. We'll alert you all those ways. And then when we actually remediate, we can proactively isolate an endpoint. We also have remediation as well. So we have two options of remediation. One is what we call click to approve. That's historically the way we've done things, which is we're going to say, hey, this is what we found. Hit this button if you're okay with us taking action. Now we actually allow so that you could skip that process altogether, and we'll go ahead if you've pre-authorized to take action on your behalf. We will go ahead and just take action and tell you what we did afterwards. And if it's something that needs more step-by-step instructions to get you back to a clean state, often there's things on the remediation side that you have to do in-house. That's just the nature of all MDR providers. We'll give you those instructions. So we'll isolate, we'll proactively take care of it or ask for your permission and then take care of it. And then we'll tell you how to get back to a safe state. We can even automate a lot of low severity stuff as well to take work off your plate. And then, of course, we have our user interface on the backside. So that'll be a health dashboard telling you, particularly if you're an MSP, what all your tenants look like, make sure all the machines are functioning as properly, give you the ability to manage all of that, give you the reporting you need, both for your organization and if you're an MSP, again, to sell through, and even the ability to export that data out if you need it somewhere else. All of this is one single product, right? The 24/7 human-led SOC on the outside, as well as all the tech on the inside. It's all combined into one. I mentioned M365 as well, our MDR for Microsoft 365. This is, again, similar concept. We have a human-led SOC. with really deep account takeover expertise. So we do our own detection work, looking for things in your data to make sure that it's very much tailored for the M365 environments to find identity-related use cases. The big ones we're looking for there are suspicious logins with unusual VPNs. We see this a lot. People log in from shady IPs or VPNs they don't normally log in from. Not necessarily bad, but at a high degree, often that is something malicious going on. When people do take over accounts, one of the most common things that attackers like to do is what is called BEC, or business email compromise. They'll do things like build in new forwarding rules in your email environment. It's a forward email, so you'll never see them. Sometimes those are, hey, some security warnings. Sometimes those are financial things, right? If they're transferring money and they don't want you to know you transferred money, they'll just have emails forwarded. Sometimes it's purely for espionage as well. We also can look at privilege escalation attempts. And when we find something there, we can, again, isolate the identity and remediate it as well. And this has worked amazingly well since we launched it. We can detect thousands and thousands of confirmed both high severity and critical account takeover threats every single month, right? And it's growing by the week of what we're finding out there. So that is to protect your identities. That's MDR for M365. If you want to kick the tires on this, we have a really easy free trial. It is a fully functioning version of our product. So again, you get the 24/7 SOC and you get the tech for the duration of the trial. So you can detect account takeovers. You can sign up for multiple products for our security awareness training, our identity protection, and our endpoint protection. You can sign up for all three. You can sign up for just for one. And you'll get us looking at your environment, finding, hopefully there's nothing bad there, but if we see anything, we'll let you know. And then we'll send you an incident report, and you'll have access to all the humans as well to do that work. If you are an MSP out there, we strongly recommend that you check out our neighborhood watch program. So this is, again, a full version of our product, so nothing taken away, that you get to protect your house. So MSPs can use Huntress for free for however long they want. It's not a trial. It is a full program where we're protecting you, right? Not your customers, but you and your internal environment for free. We like it because it gives you an idea of how good we are and the type of support that you're going to get. And MSPs love it because they're essentially getting, they are getting managed EDR and our other products for free just to protect themselves. So you'll see a QR code there. You can also go to huntress.com neighborhood as well. I know some of you are outside the US. I believe, don't quote me on this, I believe it also works if you add the U to neighborhood. If not, you'll have to, I'll apologize on my company's behalf, and you'll have to spell it the Americanized way. So, all right, with that, we have some Q&A time as well. I think we are, rated at 1:45. I know James has been asking a few of them as well. A lot of questions on, some questions on the M365 about how we look for what's called impossible travel sign-in detections. It's a good question. One of the questions we get most often, and that would be for MDR for Microsoft 365. When people think of identity, account takeover and identity takeover, one of the things that's easiest for people to wrap their head around is this idea of impossible travel, which is I logged in from New Jersey, and then 15 minutes later, I logged in from California. And obviously that can't be the same person. The way most vendors do this is just by doing allow list or deny list, saying you can't log in from Canada, only the United States, for example. If you log in from Canada, you're automatically blocked. It's a pretty noisy way to do things. It works if no one moves around. And what we see attackers do often is that's why they look at VPNs, and they look at shady IPs to try to, and proxies to get around all of that geofencing. And so we focus a lot of our work, not necessarily on where they were, but what methods are they using to mask where they were at the time, because that's what real attackers tend to do. And the majority of the threats we find are using those types of methodologies, right? They are using proxies, VPNs, and other techniques to mask their actual location. And that in of itself is an indicator that they're using something suspicious to do that. Right? So same reason Tor browsers aren't inherently bad, but if we see someone come on a Tor browser, we're going to surely investigate that and see if that's normal behavior for that person or not. So thanks for that question, Jeffrey. It's a good one. Other questions rolling in, feel free to, again, use that Q&A panel. I'm happy to answer them live as well. So I see a few questions here around like ransomware. And I understand that ransomware is one of those threats that is, again, easy for us to get our heads around. Any MDR provider is going to be pretty good at detecting ransomware. You don't need any security technology company to help you detect ransomware. So it self-detects for you by ransomwaring your follows and telling them they want money. So the real value there is looking for pre-ransomware activity. What I mean by that is attackers use millions of different types of payloads out there. That's what AV is looking for, the actual bomb that's going off in your environment. But there's actually not that many tools and techniques they use to get into an environment, move laterally, maintain persistence, and then be able to deploy the payload themselves. That's what I think of as pre-ransomware behavior. We detect that at a really high efficacy rate. Again, our false positives there are less than 1% on the endpoint side, and extremely low FPs, false negatives as well. So when we think of ransomware, yes, we do have the ransomware canaries that will see if something starts to get encrypted. But the reason we don't rely on that is hopefully we catch everything left of boom and as far left as we can. So another good question there. I see Darren asking around brand identity monitoring and dark web. That's not something that we do cover on the M365 product as well today. I see a few other questions today. So one of the questions here was around competition. So going back to, sorry, apologize for my clicking live here. This slide here, right? So I'm not going to call out any other vendors here. I'm happy to do it in private. But again, even if I was a Gartner analyst or Forrester analyst, they're not going to say go with this product and don't go with that one unless it's really, really, really bad. I will just warn you that often what you hear from vendors is a lot of FUD, right? And they throw out, hey, like these trap questions that you have to ask. There's nothing wrong with that necessarily. That's sort of, I guess, the way a lot of vendors do their business. But when you try to think through what's right for you, this is the way, particularly on the MDR side, the easiest way to think through the different offerings out there, right? And again, if you're taking one piece of advice from me in this presentation, it's these pure play budget MDR providers are often poor decisions. Whereas the other two categories, there's a lot of scenarios where that might be right for your organization, but there's very few where if you go with a lower cost pure play MDR that's looking at other people's tech only and not bringing a lot of value to it, that you're also going to be happy with that purchase. Great. Let's see. Not necessarily seeing any more questions here. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it on the last one. Oh, I do see one more. Someone's asking if we have a SIM solution. So someone heard we are working on a SIM. Yes. So that is not available today, but will be shortly. We'll have our own managed SIM offering as well. So it'll be Huntress's, just like our EDR product, our home-built technology, 24/7 managed by our own security operations center as well. So we're excited about that, and you'll hear more about that this summer, hopefully. So. All right. So with that, I don't see any more questions popping through. If you have questions for me, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. I promise I am the only Seth Geftic in the world. It will not be hard to find. And if not, go to Huntress.com. You can sign up for the free trial there. You can sign up for the Neighborhood Watch and get more information about what we're working on. Really appreciate your time. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.